Did you know Hiroshima and Nagasaki were the two Japanese cities that were devastated by the atomic bombings carried out by the United States during World War II? Hiroshima was bombed on August 6, 1945, with the atomic bomb nicknamed Little Boy. Nagasaki was bombed 3 days later on August 9, 1945, with a more powerful bomb, and its nickname called Fat Man. These were the first and only times nuclear weapons have been used in and during a war in history. The bombings killed an estimated 200,000 people and probably more. Everyone immediately died, and the ones who survived later died because of the radiation effects in their bodies. This tragedy played a huge major role in Japan's decision to surrender, immediately ending World War II. But here's the conspiracy theory. You ready? If it wasn't for those bombs, life would have been different growing up in America. This had to happen in order for the United States to triumph and become the most powerful country to have ever existed and have the entire world use the dollar currency. Let's get ready to find out what really happened. It started like any other morning. The sun rose quietly. Children walked to school. Shopkeepers opened their doors. A mother poured tea for her husband one last time. And then at 8:15, a second sun appeared. But this one wasn't rising. It was falling down. And when it did, it changed the whole world forever. Or that's what we're told, because what happened that day, what happened 3 days later in Nagasaki, is not just a story of war. It's a story of silence, of secrets, of science. No one was meant to wield this knowledge, and maybe even of something far darker. Here's a fact that sounds innocent until you ask why. By 1945, the US had bombed over 60 Japanese cities, firebombed them into dust, but Hiroshima and Nagasaki were left almost untouched. Why? Behind closed doors in secret meetings, US military officials discussed a different reason. They didn't want to destroy these cities before the bomb was ready. They wanted a clean slate, a pristine test site, not for the war, but for the weapon. Hiroshima and Nagasaki weren't just enemy cities. They were part of an experiment one the world wasn't supposed to know was happening. The uranium bomb dropped on Hiroshima Little Boy was never tested before use. Let that sink in. A weapon of unimaginable power dropped on a real city without any assurance it would work. No one knew what would happen. Some scientists feared the bomb might ignite the atmosphere. Others thought it would fizzle, but they dropped it anyway. And it worked, almost too perfectly. What followed was total silence. A wave of heat and force that erased 70,000 people in seconds. That's really wild and scary. Others vanished without a trace, but that was just the beginning. Because the second bomb, it was more powerful, and its path was even stranger. August 9th, 1945, the B-29 bomber Boxcar was headed for Kokura, the intended second target. But Kokura was covered in smoke from a nearby bombing raid. The plane circled and fuel running low. The city remained hidden, so they diverted to the backup, which was Nagasaki. But even then there was a problem: the clouds cover again. Until almost miraculously a hole opened in the clouds just long enough to drop the bomb. Coincidence? Or something stranger? Because here's the theory. Some believe that Nagasaki was not a mistake but a ritual site, a place of symbolic sacrifice, tied to ley lines, ancient coordinates and energy flow. Sound crazy? Maybe. But consider the bombs were named Little Boy and Fat Man, code names that some say echo alchemical and occult symbolism opposites, twins, creation and destruction. This wasn't just a war tactic, it was a message. But to who? The official narrative says the bombs ended the war, but many historians and even US military leaders at the time disagreed. General Eisenhower, General MacArthur and Admiral Leahy all opposed using the bombs. They believed Japan was already on the brink of surrender, and declassified Japanese communications confirmed it. Japan was ready to give up if they could keep their emperor. After the bombings, the US allowed them to do exactly that. So, what was the real reason? Here's the theory. It wasn't about Japan, it was about the Soviet Union. The Cold War was already simmering. Stalin had spies inside the Manhattan Project. The US knew about it, and dropping the bombs twice wasn't just a military decision. It was a demonstration, a warning to the whole entire world, and perhaps to something not from this world as well. After World War II, the US launched Operation Paperclip, a classified program that brought over more than 1,600 Nazi scientists to work for American intelligence, weapons and space programs. Some had ties to war crimes. Many had deep knowledge of nuclear physics, mind control and esoteric energy systems. You weren't supposed to know that, but you do now. Among them were scientists who worked not only on bombs, but on the Vril Society's experiments, the Die Glocke, Bell Project, and rumors of anti-gravity propulsion. What does this have to do with Hiroshima and Nagasaki? According to fringe researchers, everything. Some believe the bomb was just a cover, an early test of something else. A technology derived not just from physics, but from ancient knowledge. Something recovered or rediscovered. Knowledge once lost, now weaponized. That's not good. After the bombings, Japanese journalists and filmmakers rushed to document the aftermath. They recorded the burns, the black rain, the people with skin hanging off their bodies, children screaming, the sick and the dying in makeshift shelters. But then, silence. US forces seized all the footage. They took photos, censored stories, labeled the effects of radiation sickness as Japanese propaganda. Even American doctors who investigated were ordered not to speak. It took decades before the world saw the real footage. Why? Because the aftermath didn't match the narrative. These weren't just weapons of war. They were engines engines of suffering, and the truth was too horrific to explain. There's a man who survived both bombs. Here's a story you have to hear. Tsutomu Yamaguchi was a Japanese engineer. He was in Hiroshima on a business meeting when the bomb fell. He survived. He went home and he lived in Nagasaki. What are the chances, right? And on August 9th, he survived again. 2 nuclear bombs, 2 cities and 1 man. And he lived to tell the world. But the world didn't listen. Not for 64 years. It wasn't until 2009 that the Japanese government officially recognized him as a survivor of both blasts. Think about that. Why suppress that story? Why silence a living witness? Because his survival didn't fit the narrative. Because his existence asked the question no one wanted to answer, which was it really fate or something else? What did we unleash? The bombs destroyed cities, but they also opened a door to a new kind of warfare, a new kind of science, a new era where mankind holds the power to erase itself in seconds. But that door may have opened more than just political tensions. Some believe it tore a hole in reality. UFO sightings increased immediately after the bombings and the Trinity test. Scientists began reporting strange energies. Animals fled regions for months to get away from that energy. Radiation readings didn't behave logically and wasn't making any sense. And ancient sites that once considered myths suddenly became points of interest to global intelligence agencies. What exactly did we trigger? What did we wake up? What did humanity do? Was the atomic bomb the end of the war or the beginning of something we were never meant to control? Time is running out. Over 210,000 people died from the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Many more lived, but not great at all. They suffered in silence. They burned, mutated, and were forgotten. But the deepest wound may be the one no one talks about, which is the wound left in our truth. We're told this was the necessary evil that saved millions, but behind the headlines lies another story of secrecy, of symbolism, and of experiments, and a powerful message not just to our enemies, but maybe to whatever's watching. You weren't supposed to ask questions, but now you are. And if you've made it this far, you've seen what they tried to bury in the ashes of 2 cities. The only question left is, what else did they hide? My guess is that there's so much more that we don't know yet, but soon we will. The Manhattan Project was between 1942 to 1946. It was a top-secret US government project to develop nuclear weapons. It started out of fear that Nazi Germany was working on nuclear weapons. Germany surrenders on May 1945. By the time the first test bomb called Trinity was tested, Germany had already surrendered. Japan was still fighting, and the US wanted a quick end to the war. As for the bombings, Hiroshima was chosen as a target because it had military significance and hadn't been heavily bombed yet. Nagasaki was a backup target. Primary target was originally for Kokura. Because of the horrific bombings, it resulted in Japan's surrender on August 15, 1945. Many historians and critics argue that Japan was on the brink of surrender and that the bombings were unnecessary. The theory goes that the US dropped the bombs primarily to intimidate the Soviet Union and assert post-war dominance. It was an early move in the Cold War chess game. Some believe the bombings were a test on human populations to assess the power and effects of nuclear weapons. Those cities were spared from earlier bombing raids, possibly to preserve them as clean targets for a demonstration of nuclear power. I want to thank you. Yes, you, the viewer, for watching everything to the end. I hope you enjoyed and learned a brief summary about Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Now you know what the real reason behind the 2 nuclear bombs were. Thank you all for watching. It really means a lot. You have no slight idea. By the way, if you have any ideas or topics that you would like to learn and know, just comment below. Just a quick reminder to never forget. Always remember the 3 A's that you are. Awesome, amazing, anything can happen. Until next time, thanks.